When you take into consideration all of the data that you've been able to amass, what are some steps? And perhaps you can speak from a tactical perspective, but also a more strategic perspective that cybersecurity leaders, and certainly with the support of their C-level executives, can take to bolster some of these security controls and deal with some of these specific problems.
So I think fortunately the industry's on second factor authentication. We really embrace backing up your data in those pieces. So I think, huge progress on that piece. I think increasingly people have put security platforms in place, so next generation firewalls. Now you've just got to take that next step. Do you have, packet turn on deep packet? Do you have it over non-standard ports? What we're now focused on is all the little seams between it. So what we're trying to do is bring Security Center. So you can go see that, SonicWall.com, go to Security Center, you see all these threats. This year, we're going to bring that all the way to a partner and customer level. That way they can see if they have our stuff. They've got it for firewall, they've got it set up, and we can show them what we're stopping. Now, if they don't have it turned on, we're going to show them what an average customer is getting hit with in that particular area, like encrypted communications, non-standard ports. If you don't have email turned on, if you don't have our capture ATP behind email, Wi-Fi, if you don't have an endpoint. So really seeing the picture of what's happening to you, I think, is the next where management goes to in terms of compliance and risk and for customers, because so long the industry's been list type best of breed of a bunch of products. Well, that leaves a bunch of seams.
And I mean, even small to medium-sized organizations, they have so many different endpoints. Their infrastructures are quite large. You've got the cloud infrastructure you have to worry about. So obviously, all of these various components need to be understood. You need to understand the risks. You have to have a holistic view.
And they have to be orchestrated at the end of the day, right? I mean, for the last 2 years, we've been rewriting our Sonic OS. So one OS can run across all the hardware appliances, but also now can run across public cloud, so AWS or Azure, or private cloud, VMware or Hyper-V. Same OS. So now as these companies, big, small, medium, or even large, go to hybrid environments, you got the same security efficacy no matter how you go.
So certainly there's no organization that isn't reliant on mobile devices, certainly cloud applications. Can you run down some of the risks that perhaps they're not considering there?
Whether you're small, medium, or large, everyone's going to cloud apps, whether it's Slack, Salesforce, Box, Dropbox. Increasingly, though, you've got to look at the content. We talked earlier about encrypted communication, non-standard ports. There's a lot of content going to the cloud and back. You've got to inspect that. Our threat report last year identified web apps and cloud up 60% in terms of malware threats. And the problem there is first understanding the responsibility, because the cloud app vendors don't own that responsibility. And you've got to own that, and you got to deal with that from your own standpoint. Mobility, I think, is the new endpoint. You look now, Wi-Fi, the ability to intersect that. We just introduced putting security on an access point for the first time. So now I can tell if there's how far my cell Wi-Fi coverage is. I can see if there's a rogue Wi-Fi coming into our zones, and I can start to groom the quality of service on voice and data over Wi-Fi by group, and use mesh networking and IPS at the access point. And we're connecting that to our cloud security for virtual firewall. So it's untethered from the firewall now. So huge important movement as people head to mobility and increasingly are less dependent on laptops and desktops and using the phone. We're all doing that, and even in our office, because then it's mobile at home, it's mobile on the road, it's your new mobile office. And now mobility's got to catch up with that, but you also have to catch up with that with your cloud apps.
So kind of going back to the start, data breaches, certainly you're seeing data exposed, manipulated, stolen. executive leaders are still grappling with understanding this threat landscape, probably dealing a little bit with some budgetary challenges. What other ways can organizational leaders get a better understanding? Working with peers, perhaps liaising with industry bodies. What other suggestions do you have to ensure that they're communicating more? Because after all, the bad guys are, right? I mean,
well, a good example of this is IoT.
Yeah.
I've been in Washington 2 times in the last month. And when you're on the Hill, they can't even define IoT. I mean, the largest increase in malware, over 200%, was in IoT. And we can't even define it in Washington. Executives are really on to IoT. But before you connect that camera, before you think about connecting digital systems of any type on IoT, you got to think of segmenting that network and making sure you have security, at least at the network level, because most of the time you can't put it on the device. And that is certainly an area ripe for getting picked.
So wrap up, are there maybe 3 to 5 priorities you would suggest to CISOs, CSOs watching,
Yeah, get your next generation firewall, turn everything on, non-standard ports, encrypted communications. It's necessary but insufficient. You got to have something like capture ATP to get some of these next generation issues like we're seeing right now in PDF and Office. Capture applications. Cloud applications are up almost 60% in terms of malware. And if I talk to most CIOs or the app vendors, guess what? We think the cloud vendors have it squared. You read the MySprint, they don't. And just like you got to look at content and secure like communications or non-standard ports, you got to look at that content going up to the cloud and back.
That about wraps this SC in Focus. Thanks so much to Bill Conner from SonicWall, and thank you for clicking in.